Hey everyone, you know that feeling, right? That warm, kind of bittersweet pull of nostalgia? It feels so simple, so familiar. But what if I told you that behind that cozy feeling is a story that's actually pretty wild and even a little shocking?
I mean, really, think about it. You're just going about your day, maybe driving, and then a song from way back when comes on the radio. And boom, instantly, you're not in your car anymore. You are right back in that moment. You can almost smell the air, feel the same feelings. How in the world does a little bit of music do that?
This kind of musical time travel is probably the most common way we feel nostalgia. It feels like magic, doesn't it? This deep personal connection to our own history. For the longest time, it was just a mystery, but now science is finally starting to pull back the curtain and show us what's actually going on in there.
But hold on, before we get into all the cool brain science, you have to understand where this word, this idea, even came from. Because that warm, sentimental feeling we all know and love, well, it started its life as a legitimate and, believe it or not, sometimes fatal medical diagnosis. Yeah, you heard that right.
Okay, let's get into this, because it's fascinating. Forget about poetic daydreams or looking through old photo albums. The story of nostalgia actually begins in a medical textbook, where it wasn't an emotion at all, but a dangerous physical illness.
So the word itself was actually invented in 1688 by a Swiss medical student named Johannes Hofer. And what he did was he mashed two Greek words together, nostos, which means homecoming, and algos, which means pain or a deep ache. So nostalgia didn't mean a fond memory. It literally meant the acute pain of wanting to go home and not being able to.
And the symptoms they recorded were just brutal. We're not talking about just feeling a little sad. We're talking profound anxiety, not being able to sleep, high fevers, even an irregular heartbeat. It was first diagnosed in Swiss mercenaries who were fighting wars far from their mountain homes. They would get so consumed by this crushing homesickness that they would just waste away. And yes, in some documented cases, people literally died from it.
So how on earth did we get from a fatal disease to a feeling we put on greeting cards? Well, as you can see, our whole understanding of it just completely shifted over the centuries. In the 1800s, it became a kind of romantic melancholy. Then, by the 20th century, psychologists started looking at it as a mental state. And that brings us to today, where we know it as this complex, deeply human, and, bittersweet emotion.
Which brings us right back to the present day. Now that we've got the crazy backstory, what is actually happening inside our heads when that old song comes on? Thanks to modern neuroscience, we don't have to guess anymore. We can literally watch it happen.
And what we've learned from things like fMRI scans is that nostalgia isn't just one little spot in your brain lighting up. Nope, it's a full-blown, whole-brain event. It's this incredibly rich experience that gets a bunch of different neural networks all firing at the same time.
And check this out. This is where it gets really interesting. When you listen to a song that's just, familiar, mostly your auditory cortex gets to work. Makes sense. You're hearing something. But when a song is truly nostalgic, your brain lights up like a pinball machine. It fires up the networks tied to your sense of self, your own life story. It activates your reward system, giving you a rush of pleasure. It pulls up old memories and, crucially, it flags the whole experience as being emotionally important. It's a completely different level of engagement.
And there's more. EEG studies add another cool layer to this. They show that feeling nostalgic actually boosts our brain's alpha waves. Now, what that does is it puts us into this relaxed, deeply reflective state, basically creating the perfect mental backdrop for us to access those really vivid, emotionally rich memories from our past. So clearly, this is a super powerful biological process. But just because something is powerful doesn't automatically mean it's always good for us, right? Can this deep, wonderful dive into our past ever become dangerous? Oh yeah, it absolutely can. When that longing for the past tips over into an obsession, nostalgia can become what you might call a dangerous romance. And there is a perfect, if chilling, illustration of this in Donna Tartt's fantastic novel, The Secret History, which is a great case study in what happens when nostalgia is taken way too far. So in the book, you have these characters who are just consumed by nostalgia on three different levels at once. First, there's the personal kind. They totally idealize their own pasts because they can't handle their present reality. Then you have cultural nostalgia. They're obsessed with a romantic, imaginary version of ancient Greece, an era they obviously never lived in. And finally, there's narrative nostalgia. They get completely trapped in the story they tell themselves about who they are and what they've done.
And here's the absolute crucial point. For these characters, nostalgia stops being a gentle feeling. It becomes a tool, a weapon they use to actively distort reality. They build their entire identities on this fictionalized, romantic past, and the line between who they are and who they desperately wish they were just gets completely blurred.
And this all leads to a truly horrifying place. Their obsession with living in this idealized ancient worldview becomes so all-consuming that it allows them to rationalize things, horrible things, first violence, and eventually even murder. It's a really stark reminder that when nostalgia becomes a total escape from reality, it can completely destroy your moral compass.
So where does that leave us? On one hand, we have the neuroscience showing how nostalgia is amazing for our sense of identity and emotion. And on the other, we have this dark, cautionary tale of what happens when it goes wrong. The thing is, nostalgia isn't good or bad. It's a psychological tool, and a really powerful one at that. The real question is, how do we use it? And this lays out the central paradox perfectly. On one side, when we use it well, nostalgia is an incredible source of meaning. It connects us to who we are, it reminds us of the people we care about, and it can even help us manage our emotions. But on the other side, when we use it as an escape, it twists our memories, makes us miserable in the present, and can lead to that really dangerous idealization we just talked about.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, it's that nostalgia is so much more than a simple feeling. It is a powerful, complicated brain state with a history you probably never expected. It's a vital tool that helps us build our own story and feel connected. But, and this is a big but, it can also be destructive if it becomes an idealized escape. The key isn't to stop feeling it, but to be mindful of how we're using that feeling.
In the end, our past isn't a place we can actually go back to. It's a story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And that feeling of nostalgia, that's just our brain's way of letting us reread a chapter. So the only real question left is, how are you going to use your story?